talk so often about how difficult a romantic relationship becomes once a partnership, when partners decide to have children. It's complicated. It competes even with the attention that is required by partners to give to each other. So that's kind of what we're going to be trying to unpack now with Leigh. I also want your thoughts. You can SMS or call in or WhatsApp. Our lines remain open throughout the show. Where are the positives for you? What are the positives for you? What positive things have your children brought into your relationship? How did having children impact your relationship for the better? Did you see a significant change in your other, even in your significant other? Are they behaving differently because you've had children, you've added children to the mix? You can call on 011 883 0702 072 You can also put questions to Leigh Joy about navigating relationships and children and trying to bring out the best and the positives of adding children into the mix if you're thinking about having children. I want to speak about the reputation of it all firstly. They do have a bad rep. A lot of people are reluctant and are quite fearful to broach that subject of trying to fall pregnant and have children because they worry about how it changes the dynamic of a relationship.
Absolutely, and we did an interview. I did an interview a few months back about the negative impacts of having young children, but I thought there must be something. There is. I mean, I know I've raised two stepchildren, or three, and two children of my own, and I've seen how, yes, on one hand they negatively impacted our relationship, but also how they massively impacted my life positively. And if I think of babies, when I first had my child, both my children, and I speak for me, I'm not speaking for other people, but I had postnatal depression. And and if I'm truthful with myself, I think that the biggest thing that was so difficult for me is that I had to put somebody else's needs ahead of me all the time. And I found that really hard because I didn't know how to put my needs. I didn't know how to make my needs important, and I think that's what my babies taught me. Is that yes, I have to, because we have to help them survive, right? But then when they became toddlers, I had to learn very quickly to balance that, and through self-care and therapy, learn how to also honor my own needs.
I often find that when it comes to children being part of the mix, people actually view it from the perspective of the individual. You're speaking now about your experience, what it was like for you, but from a partnership scale, from the eyes, the perspective of two people who are trying to make things work, and then having to learn and unlearn their own ways. What should we be thinking about that will help navigate, at least quell the fear that many couples have when they think about children?
I think that my second husband is English, so European, and his upbringing was very different from my first husband, who was South African Afrikaner, and again, no judgment, but just the culture difference. The Afrikaner, my first husband was very much the woman is the head of the family, and I was responsible for taking care of the kids. Whereas my second husband was, yes, I'm the head of the home, but it's our responsibility to raise the children. So it was much easier working in a team with my second husband than it was kind of running things on my own in my first marriage. So I think that the first thing to really to have the deep conversation to have before you have children is, how are we going to split the roles? Who's going to sleep? I mean, most people work, both people work. So if some men and in some cultures sit, well, she's, the woman is the head of the family and she has to take care of the kids. It's a very unfair burden, and it actually creates a massive rift within the marriage. If the primary role of hers is to take care of the children, it's going to place a huge burden on the relationship, because the men often then get, they get frustrated and they feel left out and they feel like they're not loved. And where must she find the space and the time to be able to spend time with you if she's taking full responsibility for the practical side of taking care of a young child?
What other conversations should couples be having? I think that's actually an important first point, is what other conversations should they be having if they're considering having a child?
So the three powerhouses of any relationship is money, sex, and family. So if we take, let's start at the top with, and then religion. I think fourth would be the fourth one would definitely be religion, or faith, should I say? So if we look at faith, but that kind of conversation, I guess people would no. So they'd have the conversation when they've met and dating about
Even
each
in
other.
the relationship with each other, you'd have the conversation about faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're going to have a kid, so if one's Anglican, the other one's Presbyterian, or one's Roman Catholic and the other one's Baptist, or one is Hindu and the other is Buddhist. So it's an very important conversation to have, because it really comes down to values. What kind of values are we going to instill in our family? Money, who's going to be taking care of what? I know in some cultures, the man is responsible for all the expenses within the home, children, everything, and then the wife's money, she can do with what she wants. In other situations, it's split. It works out. If she earns more, then 60%, whatever. They work it out like how what each person earns, and then a percentage of the expenses get paid by both. Or some people just split it down the middle. Then family, that CD, I see time and time again in my practice. People will come and see me when their kids are about 2, 3 and say, listen, we're really struggling. She would be like, I really want to have another baby. And he's like, hell no, I don't have the time. I don't have the money, And so I think it's very important for people to recognize, and men will often say to me, and I know this sounds like a generalization, but if I look at my practice, she's always with her family and we hardly ever with mine. And when we do spend time with my family, there's a problem. So family, the dynamic of family has a very huge impact in a young family. And I think also women tend to stick close to their families even though they get married, whereas men kind of follow the biblical thing of you separate from your family and you start your own. And you can understand a man wants to be the head of his family, and if she's always going to her dad and her mom for advice and support, then he feels null and void. So families are very, very important. And obviously then the one person doesn't get along with the mother-in-law or the father-in-law, and it puts that kind of pressure on the relationship. And so the conversation to be had is, how are we going to respect each other's families? What kind of involvement are we going to embrace from our families? And what kind of boundaries are we going to set with them?
What conversations should they be having about each other? You spoke about sex being one of the factors as well that needs to be considered. I imagine there's a conversation about how to positively ensure that your sex life is not impacted, your intimacy, your connection, you don't lose, even the friendship. Because I think a healthy relationship also has a friendship between the couple. How do you then, the rules of engagement around what we ought to do around babies when we want to keep this flame alive as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that impact intimacy, right? Within sexual intimacy within a relationship with young children and even older children. Yes, sexuality is absolutely an important part. I was also watching TD. Who was I watching the other day? Somebody, Esther Perel, one of them, and they were saying that after a time of being married, people often like, oh gosh, like, oh, I know, I was talking to that divorce lawyer, I forget his name. He's hysterical. I hope his name comes to me so I can.
Yes, me too. So we
can listen to him. And he was just saying that it becomes a bit boring, sex becomes a bit boring and it's the same. And how does one approach that conversation? And he had such a funny way, because people can feel a bit, what's the word? Confronted or affronted by, like, hey babe, I'm feeling a bit bored in the bedroom, like, yes, can we please switch it up? Like, even that can be quite like
it can be hard to take from a partner. Yeah.
So he was saying what you must do is you must wake up one morning and go, babe, I had such a raunchy dream about you last night. I actually just can't even talk about it. And what poor part is going to go, what did you dream? You got to tell me. Go, no, it's too much. I'm actually, like, I'm a little bit embarrassed. I don't know if I can tell you. And the other partner's like, come on, no, it's safe. You can tell me, maybe it's something we can try, la la. Anyway, he or she explains, what happens. And this divorce attorney goes, well, if the other person goes, ooh, no, that's like a bit hectic. And then you can just go, yeah, I know, right? Like, ooh, no,
Then
we
you
can't
move
do
on.
that.
You saved yourself from the embarrassment. But that speaks to keeping the friendship alive, right? That means that the roles in parenting, if you guys go down that path, have to be at a point where you can even make a joke like that or test the waters in that kind of way. So what are the tools around communication that couples need to think about in navigating this space? Because often, and I think you've touched on already, the frustration becomes about how too much of the responsibilities is maybe on one partner, and there's no equal sharing of responsibilities, and then the frustrations trickle into the next aspect of the relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a beautiful interview that I did a few months back about the sandwich approach with regards to communication, and it's 3 parts. So the first part is love. I really love it with the way you do this. If we're going to talk about intimacy, right? So I really love the way you play with my hair, or you just come past me and squeeze my shoulder. You name a couple of things that you really love about your partner with regards to that issue. Then the hamburger part, the meaty part is, but what I'm really struggling with is this. So what I'm really struggling with is I'm having to initiate the whole time. And then the third part is, I wonder how we can collaborate so that can change, so that you are initiating and I'm initiating. So it's what do you love? What's the problem? How do we collaborate? You can use that sandwich approach with any kind of topic within a relationship, and it'll land really well. The one thing to take into consideration, I watched another video the other night, was brilliant, where food, and I had this experience last night. I was so hangry. And my partner was like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I need to eat like now. And he was like, geez, but we got guests for dinner. I'm like, I don't care. I have to eat now. And so this video that I'd watched, they said, listen, please make sure that you've eaten before you have these deep conversations, because our emotional intolerance is much higher when
That's
you haven't
true.
eaten.
That's true. The issue of purpose that comes with children, because I did say to you in the beginning, and I know you know this better than I do, that sometimes people embark on this journey to save a relationship, but the issue of renewed purpose that a baby and children bring, can you talk me through those stages? And I wonder, Leigh, if there's a difference between, you spoke about having your own children, you spoke about stepchildren. Can we measure it differently, what it's like being in a relationship where there's something positive to extract from stepchildren, even in purpose, versus deciding to naturally birth a child as far as purpose is concerned? I don't know if there is we can compare them, if it does matter even. I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I was really praying that I was going to get this opportunity to say this on air. I would not be the parent that I am today if it wasn't for my stepchildren. I had stepchildren before I gave birth to my own biological child. And I'm so sorry. Melita and Enrico, I pray that you can forgive me for the mistakes that I made. But thank you for helping me become the mum that I am today. And I am not a perfect mum, but I'm definitely a better mum than I was 20 years ago. Stepchildren helped me to navigate, because when I was growing up, I unfortunately had a very difficult upbringing. My adoptive parents didn't have the tools to help me feel wanted, loved, and seen. And so I always one day when I have children, I'm going to do it better, And then suddenly I became a parent, and yeah, in some ways I did do better. So if we talk about purpose, most families are like where they want to create a family where they rectify the mistakes of their childhood. But there were also things that I repeated from my childhood that was deeply embarrassing and shameful, and I couldn't believe that I'd become, in some ways, that very thing that I'd hated growing up. So for me, purpose, if you talk about purpose, the amazing, beautiful experience my first husband gave me was deep compassion and empathy around the mistakes that I made as a parent with his children, our children, but his biological children, in that he could help me recognize that I was just repeating stuff that had happened to me. And so when I became aware of that, I was able to process it, pause, process, make a different decision, and then act. So if we look at changed behavior, the way that we can change behavior is we have to be aware of what the mistake is or the thing that we're doing. Secondly, we need to pause and not react in any way. Thirdly, we need to process how we'd like to show up differently, and then fourth, take the steps to show up differently. So, Tshidi, the purpose for me of I went into becoming a parent because I wanted to shepherd these young people and have this amazing opportunity to love and guide little souls. But I never for a minute thought or realized or even knew that they would be my greatest teachers. My children have been such an amazing, sometimes very painful and embarrassing view on myself and view on life, and have definitely made me better people. But I thank God for the grace and the humility that He's given me to be able to do that, because I see a lot of parents that take what their children say and do very personally, but then don't make the changes, don't see them as teachers. They push back on their children and can be quite abusive. So I think there's a shared purpose as a couple, and I think there's an individual purpose as a parent.
And then where those two clash or compete, what do you say to couples that come to you for advice in making sure that they don't compete as much, that they complement one another, the individual experience versus the joint experience?
So again, I love that question. Thank you so much, because so many couples come and sit and they'll be, we're fighting in front of the children. We shouldn't be fighting in front of the children. And I've done research into this. Okay, obviously, if there's abuse, and physical abuse and emotional abuse, absolutely, that shouldn't be happening at all, whether in front of children or not. But having conflict in front of your children isn't necessarily a bad thing, and actually, it's a good thing, because I've had couples come and sit in front of me, and some have come from backgrounds where they never saw their parents fight or argue. It was like behind locked doors or whatever, and so they've never learned how to negotiate difficult conversations. They weren't modeled that. So when they come into my office, when they've got young children and they're young, they're newlywed, they don't know how to communicate. They shut down, they stonewall, they do the silent treatment, or they totally overreact because they haven't been given the tools on how to negotiate conflict in a healthy way. So I think having it, and obviously it's age appropriate. You don't want to be having sexual meltdowns in front of the children. Absolutely, topic, appropriate. But I think it's important that our kids see that we are, and it can be behind locked doors as well, or closed doors. But then, don't worry, mom and dad are going to sort this out. We just got to have a conversation. And then they can see, there's an irritation. But then after we've had a conversation, we hug, kiss, make up. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. So you can disagree. Because they learn, okay, well, then that means I can disagree with mom or dad. And they're not going to throw me away. They're not going to reject me. They're not going to ignore me, stonewall me, sweep it under the carpet. They're teaching me the skills to be able to even express a differing opinion, which in turn teaches children how to manage conflict.
I think there's a wonderful thing about children and expanding your social networks, and even sometimes driving you back towards your family. A lot of, I think, career people get lost in themselves, and it's only when children enter the fray that they remember that actually the world is bigger than me, and then they try and do that as a couple. I want to discuss with you after after the headlines. We are in conversation with dating coach Leigh Joy. If you've got questions for Leigh, please feel free to call in on 011 883 0702 072 702 1702. How has bringing children assisted you? I know in my case, when I look at my family, I think my sister having kids, I don't have kids, my sister having kids healed the wound of us losing our mother. It made us feel slightly better, patched up a little bit. So love was born again in our instance, but also drove us back to a lot of our extended family members. I actually think that a lot of us were living in silos, and now there's almost a reason for people to see one another a lot more. So that is one of the things that I'm thinking about now in my head is actually that's an interesting thing about them. And there's an interesting thing about even in where you live, even when your friendship circles, when everybody starts having children, the way they relate to one another. You said earlier something about, I think, how it taught you as well, it grows you somewhat. There's a bit of healing that also comes with bringing children along. I mean, you spoke about how for some people it's a way to make up for past mistakes, to also guide new life into the picture. So there is that aspect, but there's also a part where you get to reconnect with your network, your family, your social community.
Yes, I mean, we were talking about. It's so interesting. I mean, I look at how things have changed. From how the technology age has changed things. We are more connected than ever before, but we are more lonely than ever before. So whilst there are some families that bring children, can bring families together, but if you look at some families are living in the city while their extended families are living rurally, so they don't have that support structure that they would have had they been living back at home with, in the vicinity of their parents. What's coming to me, if I may change the topic, is just or the direction is walking the talk. The 702 slugline, which for me really encapsulates what healthy parenting is. And, stepchildren from blended families or our own biological children, they really highlight our hypocrisies and encourage us to walk the talk, right? And to grow and learn and heal and unlearn, like you said, and relearn. And I think blended families, I mean, we know that, right? They're a bigger portion representation of families today. A lot of divorce. I think it's 53% divorce now. And I think, in my experience, where a child has really wanted the parents to get back together again, that's where the biggest fights of home, because the manipulation happens.
Yes.
The trying to villainize, the step parent, and often the parents that are divorced can villainize each other. But if they can share with the parent, their children, we love each other as people, but we're not in love with each other as husband and wife. And we love you enough to want to work together to co-parent each other. And I know that it's hard for you to accept this new person in my life, and you'll have time to be able to do that. But we don't want to perpetuate this idea that we're going to get back together. And that's not to hurt your feelings. That's to help you move on. And we want you to feel part of the love that we have for each other with my new partner. We want you to feel part of that. We want you to be in the middle of us as the hamburger, and not outside of this love bubble that we have. So I think the children bring an added stress to blended families, but I think they also bring an amazing, I mean, if I think about my daughter's dad got married on the weekend, amazing lady. And my daughter said to me, Mom, I'm going to be calling Fulu Mom. And I was like, there was no part of me that felt slighted or upset. I don't know, it was such a beautiful moment. And because I love Fulu, I think she's amazing. And I am so grateful that she's part of our family. And then Em said to me, do you mind if I call her Mom? And I was like, no, not at all. Like, I think you're so blessed to have two moms that love you. Whereas my first experience with my first my first husband's next wife, I love her and she's great. But I didn't have that maturity with regards to the divorce. So I think that how parents, the quality of their relationship with the other parent is reflected, mirrored straight into the dynamic of the new blended family. And I think that if there's peace, not even I think, I've witnessed, I've experienced, if there's generally peace between the two parents, it brings peace within the blended family.
There's something about communication that you're touching on as well. How kids teach you how to communicate more effectively with them, and I think that's where the piece is. But before we get into that, I always get like carried away and I forget about listeners, and that's not fair. I want to play you some of the voice notes. There are people who want to put questions and comment on the topic as well. Let's take a listen.
Tshidi, your caller is not lying. I've funded two people.
Hi, TD, Anonymous here. I like the point on intentionality because, like, people who get married off of love, maybe you may be in love for 5 years, 7 years, and it just seemed wonderful when it was just the two of you. But the intentionality of having a family with children and being a parent is what's missing. And when it comes up, suddenly somebody feels like the romance is gone. Maybe the father really becomes a father and pays a lot of the attention to the children, and maybe the mother feels like, I'm getting less attention. You're always looking after the children and looking up, asking about the children, whereby it could be spoken. If it was planned properly together, it could have worked better.
Hi, TD and Leigh. It's Ben in Kensington. I think what's critical in parenting and what I've thought about for a while is the number of children. I think two is really the best. You can fit them in the car. You can travel on your own with two. What are some of the other factors? Budget for school, size of house. You don't have to upsize really that much, and also the amount of time kids will spend at home. It's 18 years plus how long it takes you to have those kids. So if you have two kids over 5 years, it's 18 plus 5. So I think those factors need to be considered, especially if you land up having 3 boys. The friends of mine have 3 boys, and it's just insane.
I've got a cousin who's got 3 boys. That is actually an interesting part, that to bring in that issue of how many children you have. My sister likes to say to me, you have one child, you're a parent. When you have two, you're a referee. And I don't know what you when you go beyond that. Because there is also that changes the dynamic, is navigating the amount of children you have and the pressures that are with the resources that are required to raise them becomes a factor too.
I love I love this conversation. My one of my boyfriends growing up, he had 6 brothers and sisters. And I said to the mom, how do you do this? She goes, no. I gave birth to children that they could take care of each other.
There is that view. Some people have that view, yeah.
Excuse me. And it's a great question, how many kids to have. I guess it depends on, it's such a difficult one because, there's, people say to me, there's some people that shouldn't have children and they just pop them out and have like 5, 6, 7 babies and they're not even taking good care of them. But I guess, yes, one has to be responsible about what are your financial means, what is your emotional availability, what is your physical availability. Somebody who's they're children that have been raised by au pairs, that some would say that's terrible, it should never be happening. But, each family is different. So, I think it's important to have those conversations with your partner, how many children you'd like to have. Some people want big families, others just want one. So It can be a massive contention, a bone of contention within a relationship. And often it's the women that want more children than the men in my practice, and the people that come and see each other. And then I sit and we do a pros and cons. And I do a process around what are the pros of having another child, what are the cons of having another child, and they both do that list. And CD, it's so funny. Like the women will be like the one lady was like, okay, cool, yeah, let's not have children. I get it. And I understand for the first time where you're really coming from, because I offered them both an opportunity to speak their truth from both the positive and the negative, so they could hear each other. Another couple. he was like, oh, okay, cool. So these are the things we need to do to make more money. If we do that, then we can have another baby. It's totally fine. And with regards to meddling parents, we're just going to put down this boundary. And with regards to the birth plan, this is how we're going to deal with it next time. So when they'd spoken about those three touch points that were difficult for them and why the husband didn't want to have more children, it smoothed the way for them to then have another. So I love having these robust conversations with couples around what their needs are, what do they value, and how can they get on the same page.
There's an issue that keeps popping up for me, before I go back to your pros and cons list, is an issue around the culture that you started off with, actually. How do we help couples do what they're not naturally inclined to do? So if the culture is men disengage, it's a woman's job, how do you help the men who come to you to conscientize themselves to actually a child is a relationship of two people, that you both need to engage, and that there's greater joy in navigating this with your partner, in sharing the roles as well, that even the tears, that it's okay to hug the child and to be there for those teary moments, that even you grow from engaging a child from that level.
Yes, I think that when we tag team, right, then it just, some burden sounds like such a strong word, but it's a lot of work to have a young child, and the work just becomes more intense as they get older. Even though when they're teens, they kind of separate from parents, and then we've got to do our own work, internal work, of the triggers and the buttons that they push in us. One of the questions you asked me was around how do children teach us to be better communicators?
Yes.
And I love that question because children don't have filters. They see things and they're like, no. And, I remember when I was growing up, my parents called me cheeky, but I wasn't cheeky. I was aware and I could see things and I just wanted to understand what was happening. So I think I love that when people go, there isn't a manual to raising children. I'm like, don't be silly. There are many manuals to raising children. There are many articles, many podcasts, many videos, and many books today on how to raise a child. Get educated, go for therapy, get the tools to be able to raise healthy, loving children, and allow your children to share respectfully what's going on for them, so that we can learn about ourselves, because often we have blind spots. We don't realize that we're behaving in ways that are maladaptive or that are hurtful, and our children can teach us how to heal those things.
My parting shot, should couples be going the extra mile to convince one another of what the benefits can be? I want you to revisit very briefly, then the pros and cons that you're talking about. The pros quickly. What comes up the most, and what must couples hold on to?
I think the beautiful ability to heal our own stuff and to build a bond with a parent or a partner that is different than if you don't have children.
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.